Welcome to our channel HASHMICLINICS.
Welcome to the deep dive. We're stepping into a very different era of medical philosophy today.
We really are.
Yeah, our mission for this deep dive is an exploration into some pretty fascinating historical clinical notes. These were compiled by Professor Dr. Rifat Hashmi.
Right.
And these records are centered entirely around one highly specific, incredibly intriguing therapeutic substance. It's known as Ammonium Picratum.
And for you listening, I think it's really helpful to understand the nature of the source material we are working with here. Because these notes, they aren't formatted like a modern medical textbook.
Oh, definitely not.
Right. You don't get symptoms and treatments neatly boxed into broad, generalized categories. Instead, they provide this microscopic look at how earlier practitioners categorized ailments.
It's very granular.
Exactly. We're looking at raw, somewhat fragmented clinical observations straight from the trenches of historical medicine.
Yeah.
So our goal today is to synthesize these observations. We want to understand how a practitioner of that era actually built a cohesive therapeutic picture.
Yeah, we are going to decode these records to extract some remarkable historical medical anecdotes. And ultimately, we want to understand how a single bizarre-sounding substance was utilized to treat, well, everything from highly specific periodic headaches to the delayed neurological aftermath of a carriage accident.
Which is a huge leap.
It really is. I mean, it is an obscure subject, but it offers a profound look into the human body through the observant eyes of 19th and early 20th century practitioners.
It absolutely requires a shift in our modern perspective because, we're so used to the current medical paradigm.
Blood panels, MRIs, that sort of thing.
Right. Diagnostics today rely heavily on imaging and lab work. But the practitioners in Hashmi's notes relied almost entirely on granular, hypervigilant observation of the patient's physical and mental state.
They had to.
They did. Every minor detail was a potential clue pointing toward a very specific chemical remedy.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's meet the substance at the center of Hashmi's notes. Ammonium Picratum. I mean, even the name sounds like something tucked away in a locked cabinet of a Victorian apothecary.
It really does.
Yeah.
And the nomenclature alone is
Yeah.
a journey.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you examine the records, you'll see practitioners referring to it by a variety of names, just depending on their specific training or background. It's logged as Picrate of Ammonia,
Okay.
also Ammonium Picratum, and occasionally carboxylate of ammonia.
Carboxylate. That's a mouthful.
It is. But regardless of the label, the elemental composition remains the same across the board. The notes break down its derivation from hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, and oxygen.
Right, and the source material actually provides the exact chemical formula for those keeping track. It's C6H2NO230NH3.
A very precise compound.
Very. But beyond the chemistry, the physical description of the substance is incredibly striking. It isn't just some nondescript white powder like we're used to today.
Not at all.
Hashmi's notes describe it as coming in the form of lemon or orange-colored acicular crystals.
Yes, and acicular is the key word there. It means needle-like.
Needle-like.
Yeah. So for you listening, try to visualize that. These aren't smooth, mass-produced modern tablets. They are sharp, slender crystals glowing in these vibrant hues of lemon or bright orange.
It sounds almost like a gemstone or something.
It's a very distinct visual profile for medicine.
And alongside that visual description comes a very clear warning in the notes regarding its sensory profile. These bright orange crystals possess an, quote, intensely bitter taste.
And that intense bitterness isn't just a trivial detail. It was actually a major indicator for historical practitioners regarding how the substance might interact with the body's internal organs.
Like the liver.
Exactly, which we will definitely get to. Furthermore, the notes firmly categorize Ammonium Picricum within the nitric acid group. And the records emphasize that the combinations found within this specific chemical group produce very powerful medicinal substances.
Wait, so if this is a highly powerful nitric acid compound that tastes intensely bitter, how were they safely getting patients to ingest it? I mean, did they have to dilute those orange needles in some way?
They absolutely had to process it, and the notes detail exactly how that was done. It was historically dosed in what they called the third trituration.
Trituration?
Yes, and trituration isn't just a measurement of dosage. It refers to a very meticulous physical process.
Like grinding it down.
Precisely. A practitioner would take these bitter orange crystals and physically grind them down with a mortar and pestle. And they would almost always mix them with a neutral substance like lactose or milk sugar.
So they are manually pulverizing the chemical to disperse it and reduce its raw intensity?
Exactly. They would grind it for a specific duration to achieve the first trituration, then they'd take a portion of that and grind it again with more milk sugar for the second, and so on. By the time it reached the third trituration, the actual amount of ammonium picratum was incredibly minute. The notes subspecify giving grains of just 1/8 to 1/2 of this triturated powder, usually administered very carefully in pills or capsules.
That makes a lot more sense, but it really highlights how tactile the preparation of medicine used to be. The practitioner wasn't just handing over a bottle of pre-made pills, they were physically interacting with the chemistry to make it safe for the patient.
It was a labor-intensive process.
Yeah.
And they reserved these potent preparations for very specific ailments.
Which brings us to the ailments themselves. Hashmi's notes outline a hyperspecific symptom map for ammonium picratum. The primary core applications listed include intermittent chronic malaria,
Right.
severe neuralgias, and whooping cough, but with a specific notation that it is indicated when the whooping cough attacks are particularly severe.
What's fascinating here is the almost obsessive specificity of the symptom mapping, especially regarding what the practitioners termed the bilious headache.
Yeah, that term comes up a lot.
It does. And they didn't just record that it cured generalized head pain. They mapped out the precise nature of the headache. They even compared it to the effects of other historic remedies like sanguinaria and simicafuga.
Which is also noted as Act R in the records.
Yes,
The
exactly.
geographical precision of the pain described in these notes is just remarkable. The patient wasn't just dealing with a standard headache, the pain was strictly localized.
Very localized.
The notes specify heavy, pressive pains confined entirely to the right side of the head, localized at the occiput, at the base of the skull, and the mastoid region right behind the ear.
They track the pain like cartographers mapping a river. The clinical records describe the sensation not just as an ache, but as a boring pain.
Boring as in drilling.
Right, boring in the physical sense, like an auger or a drill pressing into the bone. And they documented the exact trajectory of that boring sensation.
From the back to the front.
Yes, extending from the right side of the occiput, pushing forward to the right ear, reaching into the orbit of the eye, and then traveling down into the jaw.
It paints a very distinct three-dimensional picture of what the patient was experiencing. And a practitioner wouldn't just stop at the location of the pain, right? To confirm that ammonium picricum was the correct intervention, they look for a highly specific cluster of accompanying symptoms.
This is where we really see the holistic approach of 19th century observation. The notes list a darkly flushed face, irregular menstruation, flatulence, a tendency to leanness in the patient's overall physique, and vertigo.
But not just a general dizziness.
No.
The records specifically note vertigo that occurs upon rising. If a patient was dizzy while sitting still, a practitioner utilizing these notes might reconsider the remedy entirely.
That level of granular observation is the defining hallmark of this era's therapeutics.
Yeah.
They viewed the human body as an intricately connected web.
Right.
The right-sided head pain was not an isolated event. It was intrinsically linked to the flushed face, the digestive system producing the flatulence, and the specific trigger of the vertigo.
Everything is connected.
Everything.
There is one particular note regarding the patient's mental state during these headaches that really stands out to me. The clinical observation simply states, mind obtuse, disinclined to labor.
It's so relatable.
It is a remarkably poetic yet clinical way to describe the severe brain fog and sheer physical exhaustion that accompanies a debilitating headache. We've all had those days.
Absolutely. It captures the reality of the patient's suffering perfectly. But to truly grasp how practitioners applied this symptom map in the real world, we need to look at the actual case files included in HASHMI's compilation.
Yes, the case file.
A practitioner named Hale provided some incredibly detailed reports.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Reading Hale's clinical records brings this abstract, triturated orange crystal into practical focus. Hale highlights a couple of prominent cases. Let's look at the first one.
The woman with the headaches.
Right. It involves a middle-aged woman. The notes are very careful to describe her physical constitution. She is short, stout, and florid.
And her symptom presentation was incredibly rhythmic and severe. According to Hale's detailed logs, every 6 or 8 days, she would wake up in the morning already suffering from violent pain in the occipital region.
At the base of the skull.
Yes, her head felt heavy, and matching the symptom map perfectly, she experienced pronounced vertigo specifically upon rising from her bed.
The progression of her days sounds agonizing. The pain worsened significantly upon getting up. It extended over the sides of her head to her temples and eyes, and by the afternoon, this cyclical headache culminated in severe nausea and vomiting.
And Hale specifically notes the vomiting of sour bilious matter.
Sour bilious matter, which is a crucial detail.
It is because it ties directly into the contemporary concept of a bilious headache. In historical medical thought, bilious referred to the bile, the liver, and the digestive tract.
So they saw a connection between the gut and the head.
Exactly. They believed that a dysfunction or congestion in the liver could manifest as severe periodic head pain. The fact that she was vomiting sour, bilious matter confirmed to Hale that her digestive system was deeply involved in this cyclical trauma.
So after carefully matching her constitution, the timing of her symptoms, the precise location of the pain, and the bilious vomiting, Hale administered Ammonium Picricum.
He did.
And the records simply state that he cured her of these weekly debilitating attacks.
Just like that. It is a clear success story of matching a hyper-specific symptom picture to a hyper-specific remedy.
Yeah.
But Hale's second case study is perhaps even more revealing because it involves sudden physical trauma.
Right, the carriage accident. Hale recounts the experience of a fellow doctor who was violently thrown from his carriage. He sustained a direct injury to the back of his head, the occiput.
And to contextualize this for you listening, a carriage accident in the 19th century was a major trauma event. You're dealing with a heavy, horse-drawn vehicle, often moving at speed.
And no seatbelts.
No seatbelts. Being thrown means a hard impact with unpaved ground or cobblestone. The physical shock to the body and spine would have been immense.
Yet Hale observes that immediately following the accident, the injured doctor seemed more frightened than hurt.
That is a classic presentation of initial trauma response. The sudden surge of adrenaline and cortisol masks the immediate physical damage.
The structural shock is there, but the body's alarm system temporarily overrides the perception of pain.
Precisely.
But that adrenaline eventually fades. A few days later, the delayed symptoms set in, and the true extent of the neurological trauma became apparent.
Yeah, Hale notes that whenever this injured doctor would turn over in bed, stoop down, or make any sudden motions, he was hit with a terrifying reaction.
Terrifying is the right word for it. Hale's phrasing in the clinical record is particularly striking here. He rates that any sudden movement caused the doctor to be seized with a wild feeling in the occiput.
A wild feeling.
A wild feeling. It was immediately accompanied by trembling, a beating heart with noticeable intermissions, meaning it was skipping beats, and a sense of great alarm.
Imagine the psychological toll of that. You are a medical professional, you survive a severe fall from a carriage, and you think you've escaped the worst of it.
You think you're fine.
Right. Then, days later, simply turning your head triggers an unexplainable wild sensation at the base of your skull. It causes your heart to stutter and fills you with an overwhelming sense of dread.
It points to a lingering, deep-seated trauma, likely a severe concussion or a form of spinal shock that disrupted his autonomic nervous system.
Yes, the physical impact to the occiput created a chaotic misfiring of neurological signals whenever he shifted his posture.
And Hale documents that other medicines had been given in vain. The standard treatments for shock and trauma at the time did nothing to touch this wild feeling.
Nothing worked.
It wasn't until Hale administered Ammonium Picricum that the doctor found complete relief.
It is a remarkable clinical turnaround, but it forces us to ask a critical question about the underlying pharmacology.
Right. So what does this all mean? We have an intensely bitter orange crystal that successfully treats a woman's cyclical bilious vomiting headaches. And it also cures a doctor's severe neurological trauma following a carriage crash.
Two very different situations.
Very different. How did 19th century practitioners explain the mechanism behind this? Why did this one compound work for these incredibly specific yet seemingly divergent cases?
Well, Hashmi's compilation provides a working theory from another prominent historical practitioner named Clark.
Okay.
Clark analyzed the chemical components and deduced that the therapeutic power didn't reside primarily in the ammonia base. He theorized that the secret lay specifically in the picric acid element of the compound.
The picric acid. Clark notes that picric acid, when studied on its own, has a known affinity for occipital headaches that proceed down the spine.
Yes, and conversely, it is indicated for pain that travels the reverse route, shooting up the spine. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Clark supported this theory with his own clinical records. He documented a case where he provided great relief using picric acid to a patient suffering from spinal paresis.
And paresis is a condition involving weakness or partial loss of voluntary movement.
Yeah. In Clark's case, the patient was experiencing pain that originated in the spine and rose upward into the head. Because of this, Clark concluded that the picric acid element within the ammonium picratum is what gave it such profound action over the spinal pathways in Hale's cases.
So let me make sure I'm following their logic here. Hale asserts that ammonium picricum is excellent for resolving congestion of the brain and spinal cord.
Right.
That clearly explains the carriage accident. The doctor suffered a violent physical impact to the back of his head. This caused a literal congestion or shock to that precise area of the brainstem and upper spinal cord.
Which resulted in that neurological wild feeling.
Exactly. That is exactly how they viewed it. The structural trauma caused a blockage or congestion of vital energy and blood flow along that spinal pathway.
But how do we bridge the gap between spinal trauma and the liver? Because earlier, we established that the woman's headaches were bilious, involving sour vomiting,
Yeah.
and that the intensely bitter taste of the crystals indicated an action on the liver.
Right. How do those connect?
Well, in their understanding of physiology, the liver and the nervous system were not viewed as entirely separate silos. Intensely bitter substances like ammonium picricum were frequently utilized to stimulate and clear a sluggish or congested liver.
So if a patient's liver is deeply congested, causing it to produce that sour bilious matter, their medical model suggested that this profound digestive congestion could telegraph upward along the spinal pathways.
You've got it. The liver dysfunction essentially radiates tension and congestion up the spine, and that manifests as that severe, boring headache localized on the right side of the occiput.
Wow. They believed systemic congestion could originate from a structural trauma like a carriage fall, or from an internal organ dysfunction like a bilious liver.
Precisely. Because ammonium picricum possessed both the intense bitterness needed to stimulate the liver and the picric acid element known to regulate the spinal pathways, it acted as a master key.
A master key?
Yeah, it could unlock the congestion regardless of whether it started in the digestive tract or from a blunt force impact to the skull.
It is a completely different anatomical and therapeutic map than we use today, but the internal logic of their system is incredibly intricate.
It's brilliant in its own way.
They weren't just guessing, they were tracing pathways of congestion based on decades of accumulated clinical observation.
And this raises an important question about how they managed their vast pharmacopoeia. Because their system relied on such precise symptom matching, they had to know exactly when to use ammonium picricum versus a slightly different compound.
Right, there's no room for error.
Hashmi's notes actually list a series of comparative remedies, things like Natromur, China Rs, Drosera, Nephalin, Calcpic, and Furpic.
That list of comparisons shows how sophisticated their cross-referencing was. I mean, if a patient presented with right-sided occipital pain, but the vertigo didn't happen specifically upon rising, or if the pain didn't have that exact boring quality extending to the jaw,
then it's the wrong remedy.
Exactly. The practitioner knew ammonium picricum wasn't the exact fit. They would pivot to Calcpic or Furpic based on those tiny, crucial variations in the patient's presentation.
It demonstrates a highly demanding comparative approach to medicine. They were tasked with matching the unique chemical profile of a remedy to the entirely unique symptom profile of the individual patient. And they did it with astonishing precision.
It has been quite a journey through these notes today. We started with the physical description of a relatively obscure, intensely bitter, lemon-orange needle-like crystal.
And we ended up in the nervous system.
Yeah, by decoding Hashmi's compilation, we've seen how practitioners wielded it as a highly targeted intervention. It wasn't a generic painkiller.
No, not at all.
It was a specific tool for right-sided, boring head pain, for severe whooping cough, for chronic malaria, and for the terrifying delayed neurological trauma of a carriage crash.
And for you listening, that is the true value of exploring historical clinical records like these. It's not simply about memorizing the historical applications of Ammonium Picratum. It is about studying a nearly lost art of hyperspecific observation.
Yeah.
It teaches us the critical importance of noting exact details in our own bodies. These practitioners didn't just treat general dizziness, they treated vertigo strictly upon rising.
They didn't merely treat jaw pain, they treated pain extending specifically from the right occiput down to the right ear and jaw.
Right. They fundamentally understood that the path to a cure is found in the smallest, most specific details of the patient's experience.
And that leaves us with a compelling thought to consider. In today's modern, fast-paced world, we so often rely on broad, generic solutions to cure a dozen different, vaguely defined ailments.
We really do.
We reach for the quick, one-size-fits-all fix to suppress a symptom so we can just get back to work. But if a 19th century practitioner could meticulously map a highly specific wild feeling in the occiput to a single vibrant orange crystal,
Makes you wonder.
it does. What vital, hyperspecific connections between our modern bodies, our environments, and our health are we entirely overlooking today simply because we've stopped observing ourselves with that level of intense, granular attention?
Professor Dr. Rafat Hashmi is a distinguished homeopathic physician, educator, and researcher with over 4 decades of clinical and teaching experience. He is widely respected for his deep command of materia medica, repertory, and constitutional prescribing, combined with a practical, patient-centered approach. Dr. Hashmi has dedicated his career to training generations of homeopathic doctors, blending classical principles with modern clinical insight. He is also known for his innovative work in digital homeopathy, developing educational content, clinical tools, and AI-assisted systems to enhance remedy selection and case analysis. With a strong commitment to ethical practice and lifelong learning, Professor Dr. Rafat Hashmi continues to guide, inspire, and elevate the standards of homeopathic education and patient care.